I want to talk to you about something that, because it's interesting. I have 4 books now, and I never thought I'd write I never thought I'd write a cookbook at all, let alone 4 of them. The French Laundry being the first one, which was written in the summer of '97, and then published in the fall of 1999. So it's a 2-year process for all the books that we write. I have a wonderful group that I have surrounding me who've helped write all of the books, as well as the individuals from each one of the restaurants. So the group that I have surrounding me is Deborah Jones, who you'll see her pictures in all of our books, and certainly in Ad Hoc. A wonderful photographer, wonderful food photographer, who didn't really want to do another cookbook. She was tired of doing cookbooks. She wasn't very successful at interpreting the dishes that she saw in chefs' kitchens into photographs that she enjoyed. So she gave up on writing cookbooks or photographing food for cookbooks. We convinced her to help us with the French Laundry, and of course she's been our photographer ever since. Michael Ruhlman, an extraordinary writer. I don't know how many of you read Michael Ruhlman's books before. Okay, Making of a Chef, Becoming a Chef, Walk on Water, Wooden Boats. He's written quite a few books, not necessarily all on food, but that's kind of where he's known for it, is his books on food. And when we were writing the books, when I began writing the book, and I was thinking about who I wanted to help me write the narrative for the French Laundry Cookbook, I wanted to have somebody that was a good storyteller. I didn't necessarily want a cookbook writer. I wanted somebody who could tell a good story. And Michael Ruhlman's first book just came out, The Making of a Chef. It was about his experience at the Culinary Institute of America. He actually went there, took his family there, and lived and worked and went to school at the Culinary Institute of America for 8 months and wrote the story of becoming a chef. And that book was just published, got some great reviews in the New York Times, and I read one of them. And I said, well, this sounds like a guy I'd like to have write our cookbook. And of course, Michael agreed. Then it was his second book that he was helping write. He wrote his book, and then of course the French Laundry Cookbook. Susie Heller, the producer of all of our cookbooks, an extraordinary woman who also lived in Cleveland. I didn't mention Michael Ruhlman lived in Cleveland as well, so it's kind of got 2 for 1. Susie lived in Cleveland, had done many cookbooks, many productions of TV. She did a lot of Jacques and Julia's television programs. She won an Emmy Award for a program she did on a cooking show that she did herself. She became our producer, and then of course Level was our design firm. That was kind of the nucleus of the beginning of the French Laundry Cookbook. As I said, I never thought I'd write a cookbook, and French Laundry Cookbook was my book. Had my stories in it, had the recipes from the French Laundry, really true to that restaurant. There's no shortcuts. If anybody's read the French Laundry Cookbook, you understand there are really no shortcuts in that book, nor shortcuts in the book. Right out of what we were doing at the restaurant at the time. So it's really kind of a snapshot of that summer of 1977 and the food that we did the summer of 1997. Now, if you go back to the French Laundry today, you may not recognize any of the food from the cookbook, because the one thing about restaurants is they evolve, and they need to evolve and continue to evolve and continue to progress. But that book is that snapshot of the summer of 1997, as well as stories of my life, things that impacted me, things that were influential in my life, moments of my life that made me the person I was today. Of course, when the book was published, somebody came and gave me the book and said they want me to autograph it. And I had to think, what am I going to write in the book? I think my first ones were like bon appetit or thank you very much, or simple, kind of thoughtless kind of phrases. And then I started to think about it, and I realized what made the French Laundry different. What was the significant thing that we did? Surprise. Sticker shock. And I thought it was finesse. What we do at the restaurant, what we think about the restaurant, because when you realize that cooking is a simple equation, it's about ingredients and technique. What makes it better? What makes one chef better than another chef? Of course, their ability to get better ingredients is one of them. But the ability to see something a little differently, to react to something a little differently. It's all about finesse. And that's why I started writing the French Laundry Cookbook. It's all about finesse. some of you who have the cookbook realize that that was what became my salutation in French Ronde Cookbook. I was done writing cookbooks. I never thought I'd write another cookbook again. Of course, when something's successful, what happens? Right? The publisher wants a sequel. I mean, we have Rocky V. It just goes to show you the way we are in America. And they were pressuring me. They said, Thomas, you should write another book, write another book. The French Ronde was so successful, you have the opportunity to write another book. And I was very hesitant, apprehensive about writing another book. I had a wonderful time writing the French Ronde cookbook. It was my book, it was my stories. I really had nothing else to say. I was kind of done. And then I realized one day, 2 years after the French Ronde cookbook was published, that maybe I was being irresponsible. Maybe I was being selfish. After all, we had Bouchon down the street. There was a group of individuals in that restaurant, Jeffrey Circiello, Joshua Schwartz, a whole group of wonderful chefs, wonderful operators. Why not give them the opportunity to write a cookbook? And that's exactly what I did. We had the team, we had Susie, we had Deborah, we had Michael, we had Artisan, we had Level. Here, you guys write Bouchon. And that's what happened. Jeffrey Circiello and the team at Bouchon wrote that book. And again, when the book was published, I was presented with it and asked to sign. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say in this one? And I realized what the whole process of Bouchon Cookbook was all about. It's all about sharing. Being able to share the opportunity with that group of individuals at Bouchon to write a book. They may never have had the opportunity had that not come along. So for me to be able to share that with them was a very proud moment for me, and I was very excited to be able to do that. And they did an extraordinary job in writing Bouchon Cookbook. Again, I thought I was finished writing books. Crusade opened in 2004. We started using the technology sous vide in our cooking under pressure, cooking and boiling in a bag, if you will, for people who, the most basic understanding of that, boiling in a bag. We started using that technique quite a bit in 2000, 2004. Per se opened, and a lot of our technique was based around sous vide cooking. Jonathan Beno, our chef de cuisine at the time, came to me one day and said, "Chef," and when he pointed at you like that, you knew he was really serious. You know, if Jonathan Beno ever pointed at you and said, "Chef," you knew you had to pay attention. He said, "Chef, we should be the first chefs in America to write a cookbook on sous vide cooking." We should be the first chefs. Yes, it's true. We should be the first chefs in America to write a book on sous vide cooking. And sure enough, we said, okay. I got Corey Lee, who was our chef de cuisine at French Laundry, Jonathan Beno, our chef de cuisine at Per Se, and Sebastian Ruxel, our pastry chef for the group, to come together and write a book on sous vide cooking. We called it Under Pressure. Again, I was presented with a book to sign, and what was I going to write? What is cooking? What is cooking when you think about it? The basic form of cooking is all about two things. It's all about time and temperature, right? I mean, you read the cookbook and it always tell you how hot to heat the oven to and how long to cook it, right? It's all about time and temperature. What sous vide cooking allows us to do is really be precise on it. So it's obvious to me Under Pressure was going to be, when I was presented with that first book, it's all about time and temperature because that's what cooking really is at the basic form. And then of course, Ad Hoc. And I'm not sure Ad Hoc Cookbook was as big of an accident as the restaurant was. Susie Heller must have caught me in some kind of delirious moment because after we finished Under Pressure, she said, "Let's write another cookbook and we'll do Ad Hoc." And I thought, what? Oh, okay, whatever, go on. I must have been coming back from a book tour and must have been tired. Ad Hoc Cookbook was spawned. We began process. David Cruz here, the group in our kitchen here, as well as Jeffrey Circiello, myself, started to comprise the table of contents. David did a tremendous job working with his team. Susie Heller again, Deborah Jones, Michael Woolman, the boys at Level, producing Ad Hoc. Again, I was presented with a book after it was finished to sign. In 6 months before that book was published, my father had a horrific automobile accident. left him a quadriplegic. There's a story in Ad Hoc cookbook about that time. He'd asked me to cook dinner for him on a Sunday night. It was the early or late spring, and actually the middle of April. And he wanted to have barbecue chicken, strawberry shortcake, some mashed potatoes, and I found some wonderful collard greens at the market. And we sat on my back porch at my house up the street. He lived next door to me. And we had this wonderful dinner. Of course, what happened the next day was a tragedy for me. My father died. And I knew what Ad Hoc was going to be all about. It's going to be all about family. So there you go. I want you to enjoy your dinner tonight. Thank you very much. I'll be around visiting the tables and signing some books for you. Thank you for coming.